Good afternoon and welcome to Implementing a Leadership Program. I hope you're enjoying the HR Virtual Summit so far. I'm here today. My name is Alistair Price with my colleague Michel. A bit of background, I'm the owner of a firm called Authentic People Solutions. And Michel is a good friend of mine, and he's an owner, managing partner of Loomis. And his specialty, and this is why I'm really happy to have him here with me today, is in leadership development. And this is where, to us, and it's something from my own personal experience of leadership development programs, I've had some challenges. So a bit of context, I've been in HR for over 20 plus years, many at the executive level. And the story where I've come about with this is from implementing leadership development programs. And quite frankly, they have not been successful. So, context, I was new to being a executive level HR, leader of HR. And one of the first projects was the president came to me and said, "Look, you need to put a leadership development program in place." And I said, well, that's fine, I'll do that. And so I contacted a lot of universities, consultants, and got some ideas, what sort of courses we could offer, and put a program together. I also went out and said, who are top talent. I was going to be focused primarily on the executive level talent. So the executive team, and then we went off, and it was expensive program, and we went through a leadership course, very sort of structured. And at the end of the day, when I look back from beginning to the end, there is very little change in behavior and leadership behavior. A lot of money, but no change. So this is where I've come together with Michel, because I really want to discuss, what's HR's role. So there's certainly some learnings. What's HR's role in putting a leadership development program in place, and to leave you with some thoughts of how this can be done successfully. So, Michel.
Thanks, Alistair. I'm really happy to join you, and looking forward to discussing this topic. I think when we were talking about, you've had a lot of experiences in actually physically putting some of these in place as a VP of HR, as myself, but also as a consultant. Just talk a little about those few journeys that you've had.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think the biggest part of the journey for me has been not successfully implementing where I see sustained change. A lot of the journey has been resistance. Maybe one VP level called it, well, we're going to charm school. This is going to be fun. So we get some nice lunches out of this, and this should be good. And, putting up basically guards. So no vulnerability, no sharing, no alignment. And quite frankly, out of it is just, yeah, we did it. It's checking a box. Oh, we got the training done. So it hasn't really been to anything sustained change in the organization. And I think the impact with this is twofold. One is on the organization. So the people below certainly see, well, we're off on this training, but I'm not seeing any particular change, to the whole team. You know what? Don't get me wrong. There have been some successful cases with it because some people do take elements of it. The second piece, though, is how it resides. I'm Michel, I don't know if you had this, but on HR, they look at HR for driving the leadership development program. So it's about, is it, this is my question and your experience, is it HR's sole role to be accountable for the success of a leadership development program? Because many careers are made or broken on the fact of delivering a successful leadership development program.
Yeah, to me, there's a couple things. First of all, there's a lot of the feedback of leadership programs where people feel great for 24, 48 hours, but they come back to work and within the week, it's all erased and they've just gone back to their own selves. So it's that connection with the business. And then the second one, I think, with regards to HR and their role is really one where I think the best, a great study that came out was that around leadership development and why CHROs are great CEOs. It's an HBR article. And they had some interesting conclusions. This dates back to 2014. The key element that they learned was that the competencies, essentially, of a good CHRO were extremely similar to that of a good CEO. And if we step back and take a look at an organizational structure, it's usually the COO that has the responsibility for delivering the year. And the CEO is supposed to be taking stock of aligning the mechanisms necessary for success in an organization. And so when we start looking at good CHRs, good CEOs, I've always felt that they had actually the same objectives, possibly different roles, but they have to absolutely collaborate. And I think that's one of the keys here that we're going to see in a little bit more detail soon, but that the CHRO needs to be not only at the table, but in full participation with the C-level team. And the study from Ulrich was interesting because they didn't expect these results. So for them, it was a new finding that they delved into. And if you read that literature, it's extremely interesting. So if we come back to your definition of leadership, how would you see it?
Well, I think it's interesting because it's evolved over the years. And, I think what I've seen is it's about taking ownership, both at a self level, one self level, but for team and also for an organization to help people, processes, projects move forward. And it's about you taking responsibility for leadership. And obviously, again, you're trying to move the organization forward. So that's how I see it. What about yourself, Michel?
Well, my experience, especially in the last 10 years, really comes down to leadership being a practice that starts with being a better self. It's very difficult if you're not looking at yourself, how you approach your role, your job, your community. It can even go into the personal side of family and friends, but at the end of the day, it's very difficult to be talking about leadership at a broad level if we don't look at self, we don't look at team, and then we look at organization. But now you have to go a little bit further. I think when we start linking it is we're all part of a society and living on a planet. And I think that's the link of sustainability, is that we're not silos all by ourselves. So there's other considerations, but I think the starting point is really the self. And that's why I look at leadership as continuously mobilizing your collective intelligence in a sustainable manner. And I think we'll be delving a little bit into what that means in this presentation.
We will be, yes. So let's talk a bit about mindset, because that's one thing we've often had a big discussion on.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, so maybe introduce it, and then we have a few points that we can share. So go ahead, introduce mindset, please.
Yeah, for me, mindset is in all the leadership training we do. When we start with self, team, and organization, we look at the mindset, and there's different ways to look at it. One of them is from a mindfulness perspective, and all really mindfulness, in a sense, does is permit you to step back. And when you step back, it means that you're potentially in a better position to make better decisions a little bit more often. And here the analogy of baseball actually really does apply, is some of the best hitters in baseball just hit a little bit better than the others. So it's not about being perfect. It's being a little bit better all the time, being a better self, being a better team, being a better community organization is little changes at one time. So we don't have to look at it from a transformation perspective. We actually can look at it from a continuous perspective. And then when you look at the psychometrics and other factors, mindset, it's starting to understand our patterns and how we actually make decisions. And that's why I love these quotes from Jim Barksdale. So I'll let you introduce the first one.
Yeah, well, I think they're great quotes, but what I think is also interesting is learning for me is about, I like the thought of mindset as stepping back. Because often we rush into these programs without sort of stepping back. And the first thing that we need to step back is what gets measured gets done. And I think one of the learning I have is, did I take time to collect some sort of data, right? Of where we want this to go, like where are we at, and how are we going to measure this so that at the end of the day, we've known this has been a successful implementation of a leadership development program. So that's a very important point.
And what's happening now as well with neurosciences is 10 years ago, there was a lot less data. In the last 10 years, I think it's tenfold the data. That's so some people that I interact with that are more in the scientific community have been telling me, Michel, there's a lot more data, and actually these intangibles, or what we thought was intangible and used our gut for, becomes extremely predictable. So it's not a perfect science. The best description of it is like counting cards. You'll make better decisions more often, and you'll be able to measure elements and trends. So it's not about perfection, but it is about continuous improvement and being able to measure things that were thought not measurable before. And so we'll talk about what some of those things are soon. And then the other element that I look is the management is time. The management of time is just as important as management of money. This is a quote that dates back from a few years. So I would add, it's not just the management of time, it's people. If your company burns down, the physical bricks and mortar, you still have a company. If you lose your people, you have no more company. And I think that's why that quote needs to continue evolving. But I would say it's time and people are the two scarce resources. In a lot of cases, money is available. It's what we do with it and where do we focus it.
And I think the next quote I like, the main thing is to keep the main thing is focus. That's what we're speaking about here. And how often do we get distracted by other projects or other, I call them, chasing squirrels. And I think if you're going to put a successful leadership development program in place, or any program for that matter, you have to be focused and keep focused on what your purpose is. You have to keep focused on the data you've collected. You have to keep focused on what you're trying to achieve. So again, the main thing is the main thing, and you want to keep focused on it.
I can't agree more. And you talked about aligning it to your why, and that's a critical success factor. And then never mistake a clear view for a short distance. Leadership, because it's a practice, because it's ongoing, continuous, because we're striving to be better. Sometimes we treat these as sprints when they're actually marathons. And back to your point, it's when you focus on the main thing, you pick one thing and you do it right. And then you pick another and you build on those successes. So it is success building. That kind of leads into a bit of a framework that I've looked at, the three prerequisites. I want to get your sense before going through the model itself. What are some of the prerequisites you have found in your own practice and things that were important to you?
Well, I think important is, and we're going to talk about this as part of the model, is alignment, right? I think the biggest piece that I've learned is you're going nowhere, no matter what strategy you put in place, if you don't have alignment throughout your organization. So the people participating, people from the the executive suite that are going to be either participating or supporting it, and even alignment towards people, the rest of the employees in your organization. Are they seeing what's going to be achieved? What are you trying to change here? So to me, that's really what I took of one of the factors in this model that I've learned a lot from is you need to have alignment. If you don't have alignment and you're not courageous enough to have those discussions on it, your program, in this case, leadership development, in my experience, is not going to be successful.
And I remember you telling me a few of those war stories where the alignment wasn't there, and you can try to do anything you want if you don't deal with that, as the word says, you're likely to be caught up. And that's, I think, the broken that alignment into really three elements. For us, it's all in. It means that your sponsorship and ownership and the C-level has to walk the talk. But I've also lived it in another sense. It's not just HR's responsibility. HR's at the table. I remember being at Hyperchip, and when we were looking for our growth project and doing the strategic planning, right away, we were 7 executives, and it was right away, Michel, you're HR, you're going to do the leadership piece and make us an employer of choice. And I let them all speak in terms of the objective, and I just wrote it down. And a couple minutes later said, time out, guys, I have a problem here. I said, I'm happy to be the owner of that objective. But this is a business objective. I need each of you fully committed and engaged, not only to walk the talk, but to actually drive this within your organizations. I'll provide you the tools. And we redefine that objective from an HR column objective to a business objective with me as lead in order to be the facilitator of that objective. And we achieved it within 12 months. But it was that, and it's not a subtlety. It was that fundamental breakpoint that if you give me this objective and you think I'm going to run away with this and deliver it, I'm going to fail because I need each of you committed. And that, by addressing that elephant in the room right away, we're able to do it. The other one is alignment, and it starts with alignment to your why, to your strategic plan, to your business plan, budget of the year, quarter, month, week, day. If you're not aligned at all those levels and it's not relevant for each day and improving how we make decisions, the projects that we're making, so at, again, individual, team, and organization level, you're going to have problems. And that leads to really, what are you trying to measure? Well, you measure the what and the how. We measure too often what we're doing, activity, number of hours of training. Once you link it to the why you're doing it, then you have to look at not only what are we doing, but how we're doing it. And there's many organizations that have successfully measured that. Airbnb is actually one of them, and there's a good body of knowledge available there that they really linked the how, the what, and the why together to seek real value creation and have a huge impact and build it into at every level of the organization. moving on, then that kind of leads into quickly, I'm just going to run through the model that we do, but
Please, yeah, please do.
Our specific why we're into leadership is that I do strongly believe that everyone has unique talents, and we have a measuring system to measure those uniquenesses. And it's a bit like the analogy like a clock. There's clock pieces, and all of them need to work, but what makes it a system is that the clock itself, when all the pieces are working together, also gives you the time. And that's the definition of a system. It's that the pieces together give you something more. And that's why when you have talents that are just simply, you do psychometrics on an individual and you do it on a role and you're not looking at it collectively, you're missing the system piece. So you've got to look at this as a system, and you got to look at the 1 + 1 equals more than 2. Otherwise, you're leaving a lot of value on the table. So the first thing we do is look at that why. We've anchored our why into that unique talent. And we know leveraging those unique talents create engagement, and we know that engagement is a precursor to performance. And that's the value chain that we're addressing. The next piece is the how. Well, we're trying to break the box, and I think this conference is actually, and our speaker, our speaking here is actually part of that objective, is to break the box on prevalent leadership thinking of how roles, teams, projects, and organizations are designed for mobilization, and moving from the gut to actually a process. And that, I think, leads to exactly that. It is a process, therefore is measurable. I'm sure you've had experience as well with leadership and programs as a process. Want to comment?
Yes, I mean, I think it is definitely a process, and I think it's a matter of how you map that out, right? And I think what I've seen is if it's not properly sequenced, and we'll get into discussion of individuals being linked with teams being linked to the actual organization, I think you're in a lot of trouble. And I think what happens is the process is there's different parts. You have to, you're going to start with the individuals. And I guess for my learning is that's probably where I sort of missed it a bit. I've always taken it or I shouldn't say always taken it, but my learning was taking it from an organizational perspective and saying one size fits all. Here's the process, go secure the vendors, go secure the training, make sure, everything is set up, and, take the sort of like a cookie cutter approach, and you expect everybody to show up. And that's sort of the process. And again, people, part of the process, they're just expecting to show up. Again, they're not sure where you're going with it. They're not sure what the outcome is. And I think what I like, and I certainly have been exposed to this model, is there's a lot more thought that needs to go in before you launch a leadership development program. There's a lot more elements that if you do that pre-work, if you like, I think you'll be very successful. So, but I'd be interested. I mean, you've had some successes, so tell me a little bit, how this, when you talk about a process, what does it look like for you?
Well, one quick example that comes to mind, and then we'll go through a little bit more of the detail of how we do that, is actually when I was working at Bell Northern Research, and we had a shift in president. At that time, the division was about 10,000 people. And we had a culture of bum in seats, which meant that people who were doing 70 hours were viewed better than people doing 60, then viewed better than doing 50, and so on and so forth. But that's looking at, effort. It'd be like bum in seats, right? That doesn't necessarily mean that you've interpreted or you've converted those hours into value. And the new president that came in had a completely change, and it took about 9 months to get the entire leadership team to change their behavior. And the way he did it, it was he had set the expectation. He redefined the why of what leadership was. And he said, I expect you guys as leaders, us as C-levels, to be able to do our job within 40 hours. And really what he was trying to do there is have them actually look at, give me your best 40 hours. How do I get 120% performance for the 40 hours instead of maybe 50% or 60% performance on 70 hours. So now we're starting to look at impact, and different individuals were on different tracks, because in terms of it, there's some people that were always early adopters. You always get that curve of the 20% early adopters, 60% that are watching to wait till the others and what's happening. And then you get the other 20% that might resist throughout, and you have to deal with those. But it was just that mindset change. It was clear. It started back with the why, but a clear definition. It started with the C-suite. And then it took 18 to 24 months to go through the organization at all levels. But they needed the leadership to step up and walk the talk. And that's, I think, to me, where the process really comes in. And this, I think, really brings out this piece that you need to measure the value of that collective intelligence that you thought were intangible. So this whole measuring piece of it, in this case, we were really concrete around, measure the impact of your hours, and more is not necessarily better, because part of mindfulness is being able to step back. And if you're always in the trees and can't step back to take a look at your environment, that's going to be problematic. And that's sometimes where consultants come in handy, is because they're not in the system, so they see things, and they see things in multiple ways. So it's just a different perspective from there. And then what we found as well with our experiences is that there exists a clear link between the personality doing what we like to do, which is actually measuring the right brain, which expresses itself in different ways we make decisions, but in the creative side, the innovation side. It doesn't express itself in words, but it impacts the way we act, versus the traditional psychomedics and everything else, and our universities and our teachings generally are left brain. It's mathematical, methodical process. So basically, one of the things that we do is it's literally putting the left brain to the service of the right brain and using our entire brain. And I think that's, without getting into too much detail, it's really using all the parts of our humanity to develop ourselves at the individual, team, and organization levels. And we've been taught to leverage certain pieces that are a little bit more mathematical and sequential that we better grasp and understand. And I think we're leaving, half the solution on the table when we do that. And that, to me, is the way to create that wealth. The process we use is really, this is not my process. This is every business process, whether you're dealing with PMP, Agile, Baldrige, continuous improvement, the Toyota model. It's linking business strategy to results. And usually this loop here has different words, but we're dealing with a diagnostic, which means that we measure something, and some return and experience, which means we listen to our feedback and continue to improve. So it's a basic continuous improvement model that sometimes you use different words, but trying to make it just general. And then the mapping piece is really, what are you mapping? Well, that's the question, is we're going to measure what kinds of things here. And again, if you're in finance, if you're in sales, if you're in marketing, if you're in operations, if you're in HR, there's different things you can actually measure and map. And this is where sometimes tests and technologies come into play, but experienced people often build that intuition and don't really need the test. So this is not about, a product discussion. This is really about the things you need to do. And I actually teach entrepreneurs how they can do it in an Excel spreadsheet and in a structured interview process and a structured evaluation process. They don't necessarily need the tools. You need the tools when you want to go faster, because it just makes it more consistent. And creates a language that is delegatable to people with less experience. And those are just choices you need to make. The alignment is everything around really triaging what the priorities are and making sure that the why, right down to, that's the year plan, the quarter plan, the month plan, the week plan, day plan is aligned with the people's roles. And the pivot is really make a decision, it's arbitrage, and then the plan to do it. It's actually your, some people call it, I call it often just a 100-day plan. What are we going to do for the next quarter within a vision of what we're going to do in the next year? And then that just circles back. So the things, though, that we have found, though, with really broadening out with other strategic players is I believe there's really 4 components that really should be part of a leadership curriculum. And that's what I call the well-being intelligence. It's all the interdisciplinary sciences of a healthy workplace. Some of it's medical, some of it's financial. If you don't pay people on payroll, you're not going to be able to do anything else that week or that month. So it starts out with almost Maslow's hierarchy in the basics, and then works from there. People need to have some of the basics in place. And then it moves very quickly into the mindfulness, which creates the space to be able to make better decisions. So I call that the mindset, the decision-making, the continuous improvement of decision-making, and that element of community. And then you bring in what I call the enduring skills, and we'll talk a little bit more what those are. But to me, those are, it's a term we coined beyond the things that we know what to do. And those are, to me, the natural talents, which are measurable, by the way. Learning agility, which to me is a huge differentiator in certain stages of projects and roles and organizations, and continuous learning mindset, which with the market and everything becoming more complex, moving faster, it's not about accumulation of knowledge anymore. There's just, it's doubling every 18 to 24 months and increasing, but it's that mindset to say, every day I wake up, I'm going to learn something new and try to create the value and striving for that. And then the last piece is that diversity intelligence. It's linked to innovation, it's linked to continuous improvement, and that's a body of knowledge that's existed for a long time now, since the early 1900s and on with the industrialization. So to me, a good leadership program starts looking at some of the fundamentals at the individual, team, and organization level on these 4 dimensions. I think it's, you've done a lot of mobilization and whatnot. I've given a bit of a framework.
Yeah, and I'm from this piece. Let's speak a little bit about this, is because, you know, we see the model and you say, where does this model start? And I think that's important, is you need to break it into 3 components. One is the individual role, right? So I think what you need to do is you need to, you know, so again, you're going to leadership development program. You're going to do some preparation before you actually, you know, for the alignment piece. Where are people at? So you need to be able to measure that piece. All right. We'll talk a little bit about HR DNA. Same thing in the teams. I mean, what is that? So if you're trying to do a leadership development program, are those members part of a team or project? Likely. I find corporate ones, you're looking at an executive team, you might break it down to a high potential team where people are going to work together. But again, you need to do the assessment. Point being, what are their strengths? What are their interests? So that you can align around that. And then the final one, of course, is the organization, which I find is a really important piece as well. So this should all literally come together. So again, if you just, again, my experience is often starting from the organization. In many ways, you want to make sure you're starting from the individual, the team, and the organization. And if you're going to align it, chances are you're going to mobilize your collective intelligence. You're going to have people aligned and working together, being able to pivot and succeed.
Absolutely. And to me, it's the word role versus job is important. If you look at things in terms of roles and projects, it actually brings a different mindset when you start looking at continuous improvement versus jobs and boxes. So that in itself has a huge impact on how we view the organization, the units, and the way they could be structured. Which forces us to look at the process. And again, just very quickly, we're very used to hard skills. That's the CV, the competencies. That's been around for a long time. It doesn't go away. We need those check boxes, and they're important. We need the soft skills. Again, this is a body of knowledge that's increasingly becoming measurable. The behavioral profiles, traditional psychometrics has been around for a long time. We use different ones, and it doesn't really matter which one you use. What's important is if you know what you're doing with it, because it's often misinterpreted. The emotional intelligence, more and more, we're starting to talk about cultural intelligence, which to me is linked to the diversity side of things and innovation. It's absolutely necessary because the human being has this tendency of wanting to satisfy itself around the things it knows. So it actually goes against. So it's not against. It's more like an elastic band where it stretches. And it's not evident to put in place. So it has to be worked as part of the management process. And learning agility, which is really important in areas where there's a lot more uncertainty. It has nothing to do with the IQ of people. It has to do with their ability to deal with uncertainty and risks and how they perceive it. And it's not just one measure, but there's multiple measures. And then we get into the enduring skills. Mindfulness to me is a key one that some of the leaders that do interventions, corporations, are saying that 80% of corporations are actually having difficulty in not being in a 90-day crunch zone just by the way our society has structured quarterly result requirements, puts them in a panic mode. And so they're literally fighting, those 90-day calendars and having difficulty going beyond in their mindset, which is very detrimental. The natural talents, which we built into the HR DNA framework, to me, which is measurable, and that's the right brain piece we were talking about. And then to me, it's the alignment of your why, values, and culture fit that sometimes we do as an exercise, but we actually don't fundamentally build it into the process. So those are the pieces that need to be pulled together and aligned. And then as we move forward, and I'm just having a little difficulty here, is those are the factors to me that create, that are measurable, that are key differentiators, and that actually create competitive, sustainable advantage. You want to wrap up, Alistair, with the
I
HR's
will,
role
because
and what's needed?
absolutely. Yes, well, Michelle, look, thank you for sharing the model. I think certainly working with you, knowing you for many, many years, the fact that you were at executive level for many years, you've seen successful leadership development programs in place, I think is very helpful for me. The other piece, though, what I really want to repeat this slide, so it's HR's role, because having lived in that C-suite and an HR role, and many other participants today are in HR roles, we want to ask these things again. Do you have the prereqs in place? So I think that's the piece. From my learning, is you want to be able to step back. Is the C-suite on board, is on board and fully engaged in the practice of leadership? The second piece you also want to do is assess. We talked about that piece as well. You want to be able to assess that, okay? So it's not a guess, it's not a feeling, it's not an opinion. You want to get some certainty. The next piece is leadership is developed at all levels. It's not just something that's going to be a top down. I think many of us have realized this, but you need to develop it with the individual, teams, and through the organization. So it needs to come together. And then the big piece is align and integrate your why into how into what you do. And I think this is important, again, at the organizational level, at the team level, and at the individual level. So I think it's been very helpful, and I hope it's helpful for all the HR practitioners out there, because certainly there's a different way to put leadership development programs in place. There's a lot at stake, and more importantly, it can really transform your organization. And I think that's what that's really what it's about. That's what we're trying to achieve as HR practitioners.
And
so,
think, Michel, and I really think that's where HR is at the table, but actively participating with the C-levels and getting them engaged, because if you run away with the program and trying to implement it, I think that's a success. That's a recipe for failure and a challenge. And I think the way to summarize it is enduring leadership is to be able to predict or better predict superior performance that is sustainable. So it is a journey. There is a starting point. We strive to be better. And I think that's really the key purpose of a good learning program. And with that, Alistair?
Yes, so we're gonna hopefully have some time for some questions. We're gonna go live after this, but if you can't make the session, or you want to reach out to us afterwards to ask us some further questions on this, please, we have our contact details. It's been a real pleasure. Michel, thank you for your time. Much appreciated.
Pleasure as well, Alistair. It's all mine. Thanks. Bye-bye.